When I first started my career in motorsports, my driver coach told me something that I found to be true not only in racing, but in all of life in general. I was making a lot of mistakes early in my racing days, and one of the things he told me was the only way we learn is through experience. It's just a lot cheaper to learn from somebody else's. That's true in a lot of things in life. One of the things that's so great about the off-roading community is that when there's new products on the market, such as this Ford Bronco, it doesn't take long for the aftermarket to start testing things to their failure point. And then they create solutions, which is a great way for us as everyday people to learn from others' mistakes. And now mistake may be a strong word to use in this case, but it is still a possible point of failure. See, for those of us that have been involved in the Jeep world for a long time, we know what's going to fail on the Jeep Wranglers. They've been around forever with the same basic design concept. But when it comes to the new Ford Bronco, the game has changed. The Ford Bronco, unlike the Jeeps, has an independent front suspension. And that creates some different failure points that we're not used to on Jeeps. Two of those failure points have to do with the steering. Both the steering rack itself and these tie rod ends. So what's the failure that we're seeing on these? Well, for starters, inside the rack, if you get the improper torquing of the wheel and the suspension, the rod inside the shaft will actually push against the internals and pop the housing, leaving you with broken steering and a very costly repair. The second point of failure is on the tie rod here itself. Right here where the threads are, where it tapers down and goes into the outer tie rod, that is the weak point of the steering. So under the right pressure, this can bend and or break. While it may not be the strongest design, it does work. An independent suspension does have its benefits. So how do we get the best of both worlds? Well, fortunately, the aftermarket has answered that question, and BroncBuster has come out with unique solutions for both problems. For the steering rack itself, they've created a bushing. So that when you apply that pressure to the steering rack, it's not actually going to the internals of the steering rack, it's pushing up against this little bushing here, saving the internals of the rack. And for the tie rods, they put their high-end machines to work and created these. These billet aluminum sandwich plates that will sandwich around the tie rod at that joint to reinforce the joint and give it added strength. So to get Daryl here ready for Easter Jeep Safari, we're going to be upgrading the steering with the BroncBuster reinforcement pieces. For the steering rack, the kit is pretty simple. It's only a few parts that come in the kit. The main part being this bushing. So it's got an O-ring on it to seal it. You can see it's got a little lobe that needs to be located. It has a snap ring to secure it in place, a hose clamp for the boot, and an install tool, a driver. For this, you're going to need a few tools. You're going to need a 19mm socket and preferably an impact gun to take the wheel off. You're going to need a 34mm wrench or a crescent wrench. You're going to need a pair of pliers to cut the old band clamp off and possibly some screwdrivers. You may also need an 8mm for the outer tie rod and a 22mm for the outer tie rod as well. You'll need a mallet to help drive in the bushing, and that's all that's needed. So to do this, we're going to need to remove the clamp on the inside of the boot on the steering rack. We're going to remove the outer tie rod end at the knuckle, and then we'll remove the inner tie rod end at the steering rack. And one of the great things about this is you're not actually messing with the adjustment on the tie rod end. So your alignment settings will stay intact. So all you have to do is pull the tie rod off, put your bushings in, put it all back together, and you're good to go. So let's get started on this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the outer tie rod end with a 22 millimeter. We'll leave the nut on just loose, just in case. But we're going to need to tap on this knuckle to get this to release. It's in a taper, so we need to tap on this to break the taper and get that to pop out. You don't want to just pound up on the bottom, so you want to hit here. There we go. That just pops loose. Now the outer tie rod is out of the knuckle. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to remove the clamp on the inside of the boot at the steering rack. This is going to be a bit of a pain and hard to see on the camera, but we'll see what we can do. So there's the clamp. It is a single-use clamp, so we'll get rid of that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to pull this clamp down. Now we can slide this boot out of the way. Right here's the where the inner tie rod connects to the shaft. So it's a 34 millimeter. It is easier if you have the steering wheel turned all the way to the left so you can actually get access to this. So we'll go ahead and remove this next. All right, so the next thing we have to do is there is a black retainer in here with 3 little tabs that we need to get in and pry up and then remove that retainer so that we can install the BroncBuster bushing. So that's the bushing that needs to come out. There's 3 little tabs that secure it in place. So you can see inside how there is an oblong opening. So the BroncBuster bushing is going to line up with that. So we need to get that pounded in next. Okay, so next we'll take the tool they supplied, pound that in. Next, you take the supplied snap ring, get it put into place. They say to use the tool, just make sure it's seated. So now we can start on reassembling. Now we can put our outer tie rod back on. The bushing is done. Now we just got to do the supports for the tie rod. So we'll do that next. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the BroncBuster tie rod braces. And for that, all you need is a 6 millimeter Allen. So you can see there's a groove here for the nut and smaller diameter groove for the small side, larger for the big side. We'll go ahead and line this up. So one last thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this boot back down. Try to get it close to the brace. That's one side all done. Just got to do the other side and we're all set. So all in all, both of these upgrades are very easy install that just about anybody can do at home with a set of halfway decent mechanics tools. So very few tools needed. Just got to be able to put the vehicle up in the air, put it on jack stands, and rotate the steering back and forth, pull a couple of components apart, and you're good to go. So definitely going to have a lot more confidence going to Moab, knowing that we've done everything we can to protect the steering on the Bronco. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe. There is going to be more content on Daryl, our Ford Bronco, as well as our other off-road vehicles, and we are going to Moab for Easter Jeep Safari, so you're going to want to stay tuned. See you next time.